The mining station orbited the dead planet like a metal parasite, its dull gray hull scarred by decades of asteroid impacts and solar radiation. Inside, the air recyclers hummed constantly, fighting to keep the atmosphere breathable for the mixed crew of aliens who called this place home. The Zephyrians dominated the station with their towering blue forms and crystalline voices, while the smaller Kets scurried about on 6 legs, maintaining the delicate machinery that kept everyone alive. In the furthest corner of the station's recreational area, a human sat alone at a small table. Her name was Elena Vasquez, though the crew manifest simply listed her as Human 77 Alpha. She was unremarkable by human standards. Average height, brown hair pulled back in a simple ponytail, wearing the standard gray jumpsuit that all mining workers received. What made her stand out was her silence. Elena never spoke unless directly addressed, and even then, her responses were brief and measured. When the Zephyrian shift supervisors barked orders, she simply nodded and went about her work. When the Ket maintenance crews chittered questions about human physiology, she answered in single words. The other species on the station had learned to interpret her quietness as fear, weakness, or perhaps just the natural timidity of her inferior race. Commander Thex, a particularly large Zephyrian with deep blue skin and eyes like frozen stars, enjoyed making examples of the quiet human. During shift briefings, he would single her out, his voice booming through the translator devices that converted his crystalline language into something other species could understand. Human 77 Alpha, he would announce. Your mining quota yesterday was barely acceptable. Perhaps your species simply lacks the strength for proper work. The other aliens would laugh, a mixture of chittering, humming, and harmonic tones that filled the briefing room with mockery. Elena would look up from her data pad, meet Thex's gaze for exactly 3 seconds, then return to studying the day's mining assignments. Her face showed no emotion, no anger, no shame. This response only reinforced the aliens' belief that humans were naturally submissive creatures, broken by evolution into compliance. What they didn't know was that Elena's silence came from years of military training. As a former Special Forces operative for the Human Colonial Defense Corps, she had learned that the most dangerous weapon was often an enemy who underestimated you. Every insult, every casual dismissal, every moment of humiliation was being cataloged and stored away for future reference. The mining station operated on a strict hierarchy. Zephyrians held all command positions, their natural size and aggressive nature making them effective leaders in the harsh environment of space. The Ket handled technical work, their multiple limbs and keen intellect perfect for maintaining complex systems. Humans, when they appeared at all, were assigned the most dangerous jobs: deep shaft mining, radiation cleanup, and maintenance work in the station's poorly shielded outer sections. Elena had been on the station for 8 months, ever since her transport ship had suffered a catastrophic engine failure near this system. The rescue had been a stroke of luck, but the price was indentured service until she could pay off the cost of her rescue and ongoing life support. At current wages, that would take approximately 15 years. During her off shifts, Elena maintained her physical conditioning in secret. The station's cargo bays were rarely monitored during sleep cycles, and she had found a space behind some old mining equipment where she could exercise. Push-ups, sit-ups, combat drills with improvised weapons. She kept her skills sharp while everyone assumed she was simply another broken human trying to survive. The other humans on the station looked to her sometimes, hoping for leadership or at least solidarity. There were 12 humans total, most of them refugees from various colonial disasters. Elena wanted to help them, but she knew that any show of strength or organization would draw unwanted attention from the alien crew. Better to let them think all humans were weak and scattered. 3 months into her stay, Elena had noticed something troubling. Humans were disappearing from the station. The official records claimed they had been transferred to other facilities or had bought their way out of service. But Elena's military instincts told a different story. The missing humans had all been among the stronger, more defiant ones, the ones who complained about working conditions or questioned orders. She began keeping her own records, hidden in the margins of her work assignments and disguised as equipment serial numbers. The pattern was clear. Any human who showed backbone vanished within weeks. The message was obvious: stay quiet, stay compliant, or disappear. So Elena became the perfect prisoner. She worked her shifts without complaint, kept her head down and spoke only when necessary. The alien saw exactly what they expected to see. Another beaten human broken by circumstances and accepting of her fate. They had no idea they were looking at someone who had survived 3 colonial wars, earned commendations for operations that remained classified, and possessed enough combat training to single-handedly take down a small army. The irony wasn't lost on her. These aliens prided themselves on being superior to humans, yet they couldn't recognize a predator when she was sitting right in front of them. They saw silence and assumed fear. They saw compliance and assumed weakness. They were so convinced of human inferiority that they couldn't imagine Elena was anything other than what she appeared to be. As Elena sat in the recreational area, reviewing the day's mining reports, she allowed herself a small smile. The aliens thought they had her figured out. They thought they knew exactly what humans were capable of. They were about to learn how wrong they could be. The quiet human in the corner wasn't afraid. She was waiting, and when the time came, her silence would be the last thing her captors heard before they realized their fatal mistake. The alarm that woke Elena from her sleep wasn't the usual shift change signal. This was the deep, pulsing tone that meant emergency. Something was seriously wrong aboard the mining station. She rolled off her narrow bunk and was dressed in 30 seconds, a habit from her military days that she'd never broken. In the corridors, aliens were running in all directions. The Zephyrians barked orders in their crystal-like language while the Kets scurried between their legs, their 6 limbs carrying diagnostic equipment and repair tools. Emergency lighting bathed everything in an ominous red glow. Elena found the other humans clustered near the main assembly area, looking confused and frightened. Marcus, an older man who'd been a freight hauler before his ship was impounded, grabbed her arm as she approached. "They're saying something about pirates," he whispered. "Ket raiders or something. The station's weapons are offline for maintenance." Elena felt her pulse quicken, but her face remained calm. She'd dealt with pirates before, both human and alien varieties. The key was understanding their motivations and weaknesses. "How many ships?" 3, maybe 4. "They're demanding we surrender or they'll start blasting holes in the hull." Marcus's voice was shaking. "The Zephyrians are trying to negotiate, but it's not going well." Through the station's internal communication system, Elena could hear fragments of the conversation between Commander Thex and the pirate leader. The raiders were Ket, like the maintenance crews, but these were a military variant, larger, more aggressive, with weapons modifications that made them dangerous in close combat. "We know you have rare earth minerals," the pirate leader was saying through the translator. "Transfer them to our cargo holds and we might let some of you live." Thex's response was predictably arrogant. "This station is under Zephyrian protection. You cannot simply—" The transmission cut off abruptly, followed by the sound of an explosion somewhere in the station's outer ring. The lights flickered and Elena felt the artificial gravity waver for a moment. "They're boarding us," she said quietly, more to herself than to Marcus. The humans were herded into the main cargo bay along with the Ket maintenance crews. The Zephyrians, being the dominant species, were separated and taken to the command center. Elena found herself pressed against a bulkhead with 11 other terrified humans, watching as armed Ket pirates swept through the station. These pirates were different from the maintenance Ket she'd grown used to. Where the station workers were small and delicate, these raiders were nearly human-sized, their exoskeletons reinforced with metal plating. They carried energy weapons that could punch through hull plating, and their movements had the precision of trained soldiers. Elena counted them as they passed. 12 in the cargo bay, probably another dozen securing the command center and engineering sections. 30 to 40 total, she estimated. Manageable numbers if you knew what you were doing. The pirate leader entered the cargo bay with theatrical flair, his metal-enhanced limbs clicking against the deck plating. He was larger than the others, with scarred chitin and what looked like military commendations welded to his carapace. "I am Raid Commander Shik," he announced through his translator. "Your station now belongs to us. Those who cooperate will be allowed to live as servants. Those who resist will feed the void." One of the humans, a young woman named Sarah who worked in hydroponics, made the mistake of stepping forward. "Please, we're not even citizens here. We're just indentured workers." "We don't have anything." Shik's response was swift and brutal. One of his enhanced limbs struck her across the face, sending her crashing into a stack of mining equipment. Blood flowed from a gash on her forehead as she struggled to stand. "Humans speak only when spoken to," Sheik declared. "You are the lowest form of life in this galaxy. You exist at our mercy." Elena felt something cold and familiar settle in her chest. She'd seen bullies before, both human and alien. They all made the same mistake. They assumed that quiet meant weak, that compliance meant helplessness. Sheik was about to learn otherwise, but not yet. Elena forced herself to remain still, to keep her breathing steady, to show no reaction to Sarah's injury. Let them think she was afraid. Let them believe she was just another broken human cowering in the corner. The longer they underestimated her, the better her chances when the time came to act. Sheik continued his speech, outlining how the station would now operate under pirate control. The Zephyrians would be kept alive but stripped of authority. The Ket maintenance crews would continue their work under new management. The humans would be assigned to the most dangerous tasks, clearing debris from damaged sections, handling radioactive materials, and maintaining the external sensors in the vacuum of space. "Any human who fails to meet quotas will be airlocked," Sheik announced casually. "Any human who shows defiance will be airlocked. Any human who attempts to communicate with the outside will be airlocked. You are tools, nothing more." As the pirate leader spoke, Elena was mapping the cargo bay in her mind. Emergency exits, weapon lockers, potential improvised weapons, sightlines for combat. Her military training was analyzing every detail while her face remained carefully blank. The pirates began separating the humans, assigning them to different work details. Elena was placed with a group designated for hazardous material handling, essentially a death sentence disguised as work assignment. Sarah, still bleeding from her head wound, was assigned to the same group. They were being marked for elimination. As they were led from the cargo bay, Elena caught sight of Commander Thex and the other Zephyrians being marched toward the command center. Even the mighty Zephyrians looked defeated, their crystal voices subdued and their shoulders slumped. The pirates had taken the station with almost no resistance. Elena allowed herself to be pushed along with the other condemned humans, her eyes constantly moving, memorizing layouts and guard positions. The pirates saw exactly what they expected to see: a terrified human woman, silent with fear, offering no threat to their operation. They had no idea they were escorting a weapon. The section of the station where Elena and the other humans were taken had clearly suffered damage during the pirate attack. Broken conduits sparked overhead, and the air had a metallic taste that suggested hull breaches somewhere nearby. The pirates had given them basic radiation suits and crude breathing apparatus, then pointed them toward a corridor that glowed with the sickly green light of contaminated materials. "Clean this up," the guard said, his translator rendering his chittering voice into flat mechanical words. "If the radiation doesn't kill you quickly, you might live long enough to clean the next section." Sarah, still dizzy from her head injury, stumbled as she tried to put on her protective gear. The other humans helped her, but Elena could see she wasn't going to last long in these conditions. None of them would. The pirates weren't expecting them to survive this assignment. They were just using them to handle the most dangerous cleanup work before they died. Elena's suit was damaged, the radiation shielding cracked along one side. In normal circumstances, she would have refused to enter a contaminated area with faulty equipment. But these weren't normal circumstances, and she needed the pirates to believe she was just another expendable human. As they worked their way through the damaged corridor, Elena began to understand the layout of this section better. It was near the station's main power distribution hub, which explained the radiation. Some kind of reactor coolant leak had contaminated everything in a 50-meter radius. More importantly, it was also close to the emergency armory. Elena had noticed the armory during her first week on the station, though she'd never had reason to access it. Standard mining stations carried basic weapons for dealing with space pirates and equipment malfunctions. Nothing fancy, but enough to defend against small-scale threats. The pirates had probably secured the main weapons lockers, but emergency armories were often hidden and might have been overlooked. While the other humans struggled with the contaminated debris, Elena worked her way closer to where she remembered the armory entrance. The radiation levels were higher here, and her damaged suit's warning indicators were flashing constantly. But her military conditioning allowed her to push through the discomfort and focus on her objective. There, behind a collapsed section of hull plating, she could see the distinctive markings of an emergency weapons cache. The access panel was damaged but still functional. Elena glanced around to make sure no one was watching, then quickly input the universal emergency code that all colonial stations used. The cache opened with a soft hiss, revealing exactly what she'd hoped for. Basic combat gear designed for station security. Pulse pistols, tactical knives, portable communicators, and most importantly, military-grade stimulants that would help counteract the radiation exposure. Elena pocketed what she could carry without being obvious about it. 2 pistols, ammunition clips, a combat knife, and a small medical kit with stims and wound dressings. She also grabbed a portable communicator, hoping it might still be able to reach someone outside the station. When she rejoined the other humans, Sarah had collapsed. The combination of her head injury and radiation exposure was proving too much. Marcus and the others were trying to help her, but they had no medical supplies and no way to treat her condition. "She needs real medical attention," Marcus whispered to Elena. "She's burning up with fever." Elena knelt beside Sarah and pretended to check her condition, while actually administering one of the military stims from her hidden medical kit. The drug would help Sarah's body fight off the radiation damage and give her strength to continue working. More importantly, it would make her look healthier to any guards who checked on them. "She'll be okay," Elena said quietly. "Just keep her moving and drinking water." As they continued cleaning the contaminated area, Elena began to form a plan. The pirates had made several crucial mistakes. They'd assumed the humans were helpless and left them with minimal guards. They'd put their prisoners to work in an area with access to weapons and communication equipment. And most importantly, they'd underestimated what a trained soldier could accomplish when properly motivated. The first step was intelligence gathering. Elena activated the portable communicator and began scanning for signals. The pirates were using standard military frequencies, and their communications discipline was poor. She could hear guard rotations, status reports, and casual chatter between different sections of the station. From what she could piece together, the pirates were planning to strip the station of valuable materials and then sell the surviving crew members as slaves. The Zephyrians would bring high prices in certain markets, while the humans would be sold to mining corporations that didn't ask questions about working conditions. The timeline was tight. The pirates planned to complete their looting within 48 hours, then transfer everyone to slave ships for transport to the Outer Rim. Elena had less than 2 days to turn the situation around. The second step was reconnaissance. Elena began mapping the pirates' positions and patrol patterns. They had 12 guards in the cargo areas, 8 more securing the command center, and another dozen handling the actual looting operations. Their leader, Sheik, remained on the command deck with the captured Zephyrians. During the next work shift, Elena tested the guards' alertness. She deliberately dropped a piece of contaminated debris, creating a loud clang that echoed through the corridor. The nearest guard barely looked up from his equipment check. They were confident that the radiation and poor working conditions would keep the humans too sick and weak to cause trouble. That confidence was about to become their downfall. Elena spent the rest of the shift identifying strategic targets. The station's life support could be disrupted from several access points. The artificial gravity generators were vulnerable to sabotage. Most importantly, the pirates' own ships were docked in predictable patterns that would make them easy targets if she could reach the station's external weapons. By the end of the work period, Elena had what she needed: weapons, intelligence, and a plan. The other humans still thought she was just another prisoner, quietly helping them survive the ordeal. The pirates still saw her as a harmless, broken creature, too frightened to be a threat. Tomorrow they would learn the difference between silence and fear. Tomorrow, the quiet human in the corner would remind them why humanity had earned its place among the stars through conquest, not surrender. Elena's opportunity came during the station's night cycle, when most of the pirates were either sleeping or focused on loading stolen materials onto their ships. The guards watching the humans had grown careless, confident that their prisoners were too weak and sick from radiation exposure to pose any threat. Sarah was recovering better than expected, thanks to the military stimulants Elena had given her. Marcus and the others still looked exhausted, but they were alert enough to follow simple instructions. Elena had been carefully preparing them throughout the day, giving them small tasks that would position them for what was coming. "When I give the signal, Elena whispered to Marcus during their meal break. Take everyone to the emergency shelter near Section 7. Lock yourselves in and don't come out until you hear the all-clear signal over the comm system. What signal? Marcus asked, confused. You'll know it when you hear it, Elena replied. At 0300 hours, Elena made her move. The corridor guard was half asleep at his post, his energy weapon resting carelessly across his lap. Elena approached him slowly, carrying a piece of debris as if she were still working on the cleanup. Excuse me, she said softly, her voice barely above a whisper. The guard looked up irritably, about to bark an order for her to get back to work. Instead, he found Elena's combat knife buried between the plates of his exoskeleton. He managed only a brief gurgling sound before Elena's hand covered his translator, muffling any noise. Elena caught the guard's weapon as he fell, checking the charge level and safety mechanisms. Standard Ket military issue. She'd trained with similar weapons during her colonial service. The grip was awkward for human hands, but manageable. She moved to the next guard position using the same quiet approach. This guard was more alert. But Elena had been moving silently through hostile territory since before most of these pirates had molted their first shell. The guard noticed her approach just in time to see Elena's stolen pistol aimed at his head. Make a sound and die, she whispered. The guard's limbs trembled as he slowly set down his weapon. Elena used strips torn from her radiation suit to bind him and gag his translator. With 2 guards down and the corridor secure, she could begin the real work. Elena's first target was the communication array. The pirates had been using the station's own equipment to coordinate their operations, and Elena knew exactly how to turn that advantage against them. She made her way through maintenance tunnels, avoiding the main corridors where guards might spot her. The communication center was lightly defended, just one guard monitoring the external channels for any sign of rescue ships or military patrols. Elena eliminated him quickly and quietly, then began her work on the equipment. Her military training had included electronic warfare and communications disruption. Within minutes, she had rerouted the pirates' internal communications through a filter that would delay their messages by several seconds. Not enough to be immediately noticeable, but enough to create confusion during a crisis. Next, Elena accessed the station's emergency beacon system. Colonial mining stations were required to maintain automated distress signals that could reach nearby military patrols. The pirates had disabled the main beacon, but they hadn't found the backup system hidden in the stations. Elena activated the backup beacon and programmed it with a specific sequence that would identify her as a colonial military operative requesting immediate assistance. If there were any human ships within a dozen light years, they would receive her signal and know that a trained soldier was aboard the station. With communications handled, Elena moved to her next target, the station's defensive systems. The pirates had disabled the main weapon arrays, but they'd missed the point defense turrets designed to handle small debris and microasteroids. These weapons weren't powerful enough to threaten a ship, but they could cause serious damage to exposed personnel or equipment. Elena reactivated 3-point defense turrets and programmed them to target anything moving near the pirates' docked ships. When the pirates tried to evacuate with their stolen goods, they would find their escape route under fire. The artificial gravity generators were Elena's third target. She couldn't shut them down completely without affecting the human prisoners, but she could create selective gravity failures in specific sections of the station. Elena programmed the generators to randomly fluctuate in the areas where pirates were sleeping, creating enough disorientation to slow their response when the real attack began. By 0400 hours, Elena had set the stage for chaos. Now came the direct confrontation. She made her way toward the cargo bay where most of the pirates were loading stolen materials. Through a maintenance hatch, she could see 8 pirates working with heavy equipment, their weapons set aside while they focused on moving crates of rare minerals. Elena had 2 pulse pistols, 30 rounds of ammunition, and the element of surprise. Against 8 trained pirates in an open space, those advantages would have to be enough. She opened the maintenance hatch slowly, careful not to make any noise. The pirates were arguing about loading priorities, their voices creating enough background noise to cover Elena's approach. She positioned herself behind a stack of crates that would provide cover and give her clear shots at most of the pirates. Elena took a deep breath, centered herself the way her military instructors had taught her, and opened fire. The first 3 pirates went down before they realized they were under attack. The 4th managed to shout a warning before Elena's shot took him in the chest. The remaining 4 scattered, diving for cover and trying to reach their weapons. Elena moved between the crates like a ghost, using her knowledge of the cargo bay layout to stay ahead of their return fire. When one pirate tried to flank her position, she was already gone, appearing behind a different stack of containers to put 2 rounds into his back. The surviving pirates were calling for help over their communicators, but Elena's sabotage was already causing problems. Their messages were being delayed and scrambled, making it difficult for guards in other sections to understand what was happening. Elena eliminated the last 2 pirates in quick succession, then grabbed additional weapons and ammunition from their bodies. The cargo bay was secure, but she could hear running footsteps in the corridors. Reinforcements were coming. She activated the communicator she'd taken from the first guard and spoke in the calm, professional tone she'd learned during her military service. "Attention, all pirates aboard this station. This is Elena Vasquez, Colonial Defense Corps Special Forces. You have 30 seconds to surrender, before I demonstrate what happens when you mistake human silence for human weakness." The response to Elena's announcement was immediate and predictable. Instead of surrendering, the pirates reacted with rage and disbelief. Through the communicator, she could hear Raid Commander Sheik shouting orders to his scattered forces. "Impossible! Humans don't have soldiers. Find this female and bring me her head." Elena smiled grimly as she prepared for the assault she knew was coming. The pirates' arrogance was about to become their downfall. They still couldn't accept that a human might be more dangerous than they were. The first wave of reinforcements arrived within minutes. 6 pirates armed with heavy weapons, moving cautiously through the cargo bay entrances. They expected to find a terrified human hiding behind containers, not a trained soldier who had turned the entire bay into a killing field. Elena had spent the waiting time setting up crossfires and choke points. When the pirates entered, they found themselves caught in carefully planned ambushes. Elena moved through the shadows between containers, appearing just long enough to eliminate targets before vanishing again. The pirates' heavy weapons were useless in the close-quarters combat Elena had forced on them. Their energy rifles were designed for ship-to-ship boarding actions, not hunting a single target through a maze of cargo containers. Elena's smaller pulse pistols were perfect for the environment, accurate, quiet, and deadly at close range. Within 10 minutes, all 6 reinforcements were down. Elena collected their weapons and equipment, building an arsenal for the larger confrontation she knew was coming. She also found something interesting on one of the bodies, a communicator tuned to the pirates' command frequency. Elena listened as Schick tried to coordinate his remaining forces. The gravity fluctuations she'd programmed were causing chaos in the sleeping quarters. Pirates were reporting system malfunctions throughout the station. The point defense turrets had activated and were preventing the pirates from accessing their ships. "The human is somehow controlling station systems," one of Schick's lieutenants reported. "She's turned our own base against us." "Then we bring the Zephyrians to the cargo bay," Schick replied. "Use them as shields. Even a human soldier won't fire through hostages." Elena's expression hardened. The pirates were going to use the other prisoners as human shields, a cowardly tactic but an effective one. She needed to change the terms of engagement before Schick could implement his plan. Elena made her way toward the command center, moving through maintenance shafts and service corridors that the pirates hadn't bothered to secure. Her military training had included infiltration techniques, and the station's layout was now as familiar to her as her own quarters. The command center was heavily defended. 8 pirates with overlapping fields of fire, plus Schick himself, directing operations from the central console. The captured Zephyrians were bound with energy restraints, their crystal voices muted by inhibitor devices. Elena studied the situation through a ventilation grate, analyzing sightlines and defensive positions. A direct assault would be suicide, even for someone with her training. She needed a different approach. The solution came from understanding the pirates' psychology. They saw themselves as superior warriors, conquerors who had taken the station through strength and courage. Their pride would be their weakness. Elena activated her communicator and spoke directly to Schick. "Raid Commander, this is Elena Vasquez. I have a proposition for you." Schick's response crackled through the speakers. "You will surrender immediately, human, or watch your fellow prisoners die slowly." I'll fight you, Elena said simply. Single combat. Winner takes the station. The command center fell silent. Elena could hear the pirates discussing the proposal in their chittering language, their translators occasionally picking up fragments of conversation. She's trying to trick us, one lieutenant warned. Single combat is an honorable tradition, another argued. Our ancestors— Silence. Sheik's voice cut through the debate. You think you can defeat me, little human? I am twice your size and armed with weapons your species has never seen. Then prove it, Elena replied, unless you're afraid of a weak human female. Elena knew she was manipulating Sheik's pride, but it was a calculated risk. The alternative was a prolonged siege that would end with hostages being executed. At least in single combat, she would have a chance to save the other prisoners. Very well, Sheik announced. We meet in the central hub. No weapons, no tricks. When I crush your fragile bones, your species will learn their proper place in this galaxy. Elena made her way to the central hub, the large open area at the station's core where major corridors intersected. It was a space designed for gatherings and announcements, with multiple levels connected by stairs and platforms. Perfect for what Elena had in mind. Sheik arrived with his remaining forces, 12 pirates forming a circle around the combat area. The Zephyrian prisoners were brought as witnesses, their restraints keeping them docile but allowing them to observe. Elena faced her opponent across the open space. Sheik was indeed impressive, nearly 8 feet tall when rearing on his hind legs with metal-reinforced claws and chitin armor that looked capable of stopping small arms fire. His multiple limbs gave him advantages in reach and grappling that no human could match. Last chance to surrender, human, Sheik announced. Bow down and I might let you live as my personal servant. Elena's response was to remove her radiation suit jacket, revealing the lean muscle and scars of a professional soldier. She rolled her shoulders and stretched her neck, preparing for combat with the calm professionalism that had carried her through 3 colonial wars. I tried being quiet, Elena said, her voice carrying clearly through the hub. I tried being invisible. I tried letting you think humans were weak and helpless. She settled into a combat stance that Sheik didn't recognize, a fighting style, developed specifically for combat against alien species with superior reach and strength, but you had to hurt my people. Elena continued. You had to threaten innocent prisoners. You had to mistake silence for fear. Sheik charged, his enhanced limbs striking with enough force to shatter human bones. Elena wasn't there when his claws arrived. She had moved with liquid grace, sliding under his attack and striking at the joints where his natural chitin met his metal reinforcements. Now you get to learn, Elena said as Sheik stumbled, confused by her speed and technique, why humans conquered half the galaxy before you even learned to use tools. The fight between Elena and Sheik was unlike anything the watching aliens had ever seen. They expected a quick execution, the massive pirate leader overwhelming a small human female through sheer size and strength. Instead, they witnessed something that challenged everything they thought they knew about humanity. Sheik's first series of attacks should have ended the fight instantly. His metal-reinforced claws struck with enough force to punch through hull plating, and his reach advantage meant Elena couldn't get close without exposing herself to devastating counterattacks. But Elena fought like liquid shadow, flowing around his strikes with movements that seemed to defy physics. Elena's combat style had been developed during the colonial wars, specifically designed for fighting alien species with natural advantages over humans. She used Sheik's size against him, staying inside his reach where his longer limbs became liabilities. When he struck high, she went low. When he tried to grapple, she became impossible to hold. Stand still and die with honor, Sheik roared, his translator converting his frustrated chittering into words that echoed through the hub. Elena's response was to target the gaps in his natural armor with precise surgical strikes. Her knowledge of Ket anatomy, gained through months of working alongside their maintenance crews, allowed her to find pressure points and vulnerable joints that Sheik never expected her to know. The watching pirates began to murmur among themselves as the fight continued. Their invincible leader was being systematically dismantled by a creature they considered barely above livestock. Elena moved with the deadly grace of a predator, each strike calculated to cause maximum damage while avoiding Sheik's increasingly desperate counterattacks. Impossible, one of the pirate lieutenants whispered. She's just a human. They don't fight like this. Commander Thex, still bound but able to observe, found his entire worldview shifting as he watched Elena work. The quiet, submissive human he'd dismissed and humiliated was revealing herself to be something far more dangerous than any warrior in his own species. Elena's strategy was beginning to show results. Sheik's movements were slowing as she systematically damaged the joints in his exoskeleton. His metal reinforcements, designed to protect against energy weapons and cutting tools, were useless against Elena's knowledge of anatomy and pressure point targeting. "You fight like a coward," Sheik accused, his breath coming in ragged gasps. "Face me with honor." "Honor?" Elena's voice was calm despite the deadly dance she was performing. "You're a slaver and a murderer. You don't get to lecture me about honor." Elena stepped inside Sheik's guard and drove her elbow into a nerve cluster she'd identified earlier. Sheik's right side went numb, his enhanced limbs suddenly useless. He tried to compensate with his remaining functional arms, but Elena was already moving to her next target. The watching aliens fell silent as they realized what they were witnessing. This wasn't just a fight, it was a demonstration. Elena was systematically proving that human beings were not the weak, helpless creatures they'd assumed. She was showing them what happened when humanity's apex predators decided to stop hiding. Sheik made one final, desperate charge, throwing all his remaining strength into a killing blow that should have crushed Elena's skull. Elena stepped aside at the last possible moment, using Sheik's own momentum to send him crashing into the hub's central support column. The impact stunned Sheik, leaving him vulnerable for the brief moment Elena needed. She moved behind him and applied a nerve hold that her instructors had taught her during alien combat training. Sheik's massive form went rigid, then collapsed as his nervous system overloaded. The central hub fell completely silent. Elena stood over her fallen opponent, breathing heavily but clearly uninjured. Around the circle, 12 pirate warriors stared at the impossible scene before them, their leader defeated by a single human using nothing but skill and determination. "Your commander is alive but paralyzed," Elena announced, her voice carrying clearly through the space. "The nerve damage will heal in a few hours. He'll be able to stand trial for his crimes." One of the pirate lieutenants raised his weapon, but Elena's voice stopped him cold. "I wouldn't," she said without turning around. "Your communications are compromised, your ships are under fire from the station's defenses, and you're trapped on a mining platform with a human soldier who just demonstrated what happens when you threaten her people." Elena finally turned to face the circle of pirates, and something in her expression made them step backward involuntarily. "You have two choices," Elena continued. "You can surrender now and face justice through proper legal channels, or you can keep fighting and learn exactly how my species conquered half the galaxy." The pirates looked at each other uncertainly. Their entire worldview was crumbling around them. Humans weren't supposed to be capable of this level of combat prowess. They were supposed to be weak, broken creatures suitable only for slave labor. "She's bluffing," one lieutenant declared. "She's only one human. There are still 12 of us." Elena's smile was cold and predatory. 12 of you who just watched me dismantle your best warrior without breaking a sweat. 12 of you who are trapped on a station where I control life support, artificial gravity, and defensive systems. 12 of you who are about to discover that the quiet human in the corner was never afraid. She was just choosing her moment. Elena activated the communicator she'd taken from Drake's unconscious form. "Attention all station personnel. This is Elena Vasquez, Colonial Defense Corps. The pirate threat has been neutralized. All human and alien crew members are to report to designated safe zones for medical evaluation and debriefing." She paused, looking directly at the circle of defeated pirates. "And to any other species listening to this transmission, remember today. Remember that human silence doesn't mean human weakness. Remember that when we choose to fight, we don't lose." The emergency beacon Elena had activated earlier was already broadcasting her victory throughout nearby space. Within hours, colonial defense ships would arrive to secure the station and process the captured pirates. But the real victory wasn't the defeat of Sheik or the rescue of the prisoners. The real victory was the look in the aliens' eyes as they finally understood what humanity truly was. Not broken slaves or inferior creatures, but the most dangerous species in the galaxy, patient enough to hide their strength until the moment came to use it. 3 days after the pirate attack, the mining station buzzed with activity as colonial defense ships completed their investigation and prisoner processing. Elena stood in the station's observation deck, watching as the last of Shik's forces were transferred to military custody. The pirate leader himself had recovered from his paralysis, but his spirit seemed permanently broken. Commander Thex approached her hesitantly, his massive Zephyrian frame somehow seeming smaller than it had before. The crystal tones of his voice carried a note Elena had never heard from him before. Respect. Human 7-7. Elena, he corrected himself. I owe you an apology. We all do. Elena turned to look at him, her expression neutral. For what? For everything. For treating you as inferior. For assuming silence meant weakness. For... Thex paused, struggling with concepts that challenged his entire worldview. For not seeing what you really were. And what am I really? Elena asked. Thex was quiet for a long moment, watching as human military ships maintained protective formations around the station. You're what we should have feared all along. Not because you're violent or aggressive, but because you're patient. You waited 8 months watching, learning, preparing. When the moment came, you acted with precision that none of us could have imagined. Elena nodded slowly. My species learned long ago that the loudest voice in the room is rarely the most dangerous one. We learned to watch, to adapt, to strike only when victory was certain. The other humans had gathered in the observation lounge, and Elena could see the change in their behavior as well. Marcus stood straighter now, his voice stronger when he spoke to the alien crew members. Sarah, fully recovered thanks to proper medical treatment, looked at the Zephyrians and Ket as equals rather than superiors. The Colonial Defense Corps wants to offer you a commission. Thex continued. Full reinstatement at your former rank with commendations for your actions here. Elena considered the offer. Part of her missed the structure and purpose of military life. But she'd learned something during her months of forced silence and observation. I'm grateful for the offer, she said finally, but I think I'll decline. Thex looked surprised. You're staying here? On the mining station? For a while. Elena gestured toward the humans who were talking animatedly with some of the Ket maintenance crews. These people learned something important over the past few days. They learned that humans don't have to accept inferior treatment just because someone else thinks we're weak. Elena had spent the morning in meetings with the station's management, negotiating new working conditions and pay scales for human employees. The pirates' attack had demonstrated the value of having trained military personnel among the crew, and Elena's actions had given her significant leverage in those negotiations. There's going to be a lot of changes around here, Elena continued. Better safety protocols, fair treatment for all species, and proper respect for what each race brings to the operation. Through the observation deck's windows, Elena could see human ships taking up permanent patrol positions around the mining station. Word of the pirate attack and Elena's response had spread quickly through colonial space, and military command wasn't taking any chances with future security. The galaxy is going to be different now, Thex observed. Other species saw the recordings of your fight with Shik. They're asking questions about human capabilities that they never asked before. Elena smiled. Good. Maybe now they'll think twice before assuming silence means submission. The station's communication system crackled to life, announcing the arrival of another transport ship. This one carried replacement crew members and new equipment, but also something more significant. It carried news from the wider galaxy. Elena's actions had become legendary almost overnight. The story of the quiet human who single-handedly defeated a pirate raid was spreading through alien space, challenging assumptions that had persisted for decades. Some species were reconsidering their policies toward human colonies. Others were quietly reassessing their own security arrangements. Sarah approached Elena at the observation window, her expression thoughtful. The other humans are calling you a hero, she said. But you don't look happy about it. Heroes are for stories, Elena replied. I'm just someone who did what needed to be done. Will you teach us? Sarah asked. Not just fighting, but everything. How to be strong without being loud. How to make them respect us. Elena looked at the young woman, seeing something she recognized from her own military training. The moment when someone decides to stop accepting limitations and starts demanding better. Strength isn't about fighting, Elena said. It's about knowing when to fight and when to wait, and when to speak so quietly that everyone has to lean in to hear you. As the day shift began, Elena watched the mixed crew go about their duties with a new dynamic. Zephyrians still held command positions, but they consulted with human workers instead of dismissing them. Ket maintenance teams included humans as equals rather than subordinates. The entire social structure of the station had shifted in response to 3 days of crisis. Elena's communicator chimed with an incoming message from Colonial Command. She read it quickly, then deleted it without responding. They would keep offering her commissions and medals and opportunities to become the poster child for human military prowess. But Elena had found something more valuable than rank or recognition. She had found the satisfaction of changing an entire world's assumptions through patient action rather than loud proclamation. The quiet human in the corner had become something the galaxy would remember, not because she was the strongest, or the fastest or the most heavily armed, but because she understood that true power came from choosing the right moment to reveal what you really were. And in the end, that lesson would prove more dangerous to humanity's enemies than any weapon ever forged.